Due to technical difficulties, we are joining the program already in progress.
Nets, APTs, don't do that anymore, but it was pretty fun for a while. And I have a background in behavioral psychology. A quick agenda. Intro into some bug bounty data, because I mentioned I'm a data analyst. We'll talk about some bugs, actual critical vulnerabilities. I've got 3 new disclosures and 3 existing bugs from some other programs to talk about today. And then we're going to talk about if you are a program owner for a bounty, and you work in your security team, how can you increase your signal to noise or get through the noise faster to find those high value vulnerabilities. And so basically talking about how can you get the most out of a bounty program. I'll do a quick summary with some call to action, and then if I don't run over, we'll have time for questions. This talk is not selling you on a bug bounty. I'm not going to tell you if you're ready for a bug bounty, what to consider. I'm not going to try to recruit you to be a bug bounty. If you have questions on any of these things, please see me after or during DEF CON. I'm here all weekend. But this is really just going to stay focused on critical vulnerabilities. So, getting started. Let's start off talking about Google. Google has a vulnerability reward program they call their VRP. They publish some statistics, not all the statistics, but some. And this does not include the Android reward program that was announced this year. It does not include the patch reward program, where they're rewarding people for actually writing fixes, not just finding vulnerabilities. And it does not include the Chrome reward program. What it does include is, Google.com, YouTube.com, Blogger.com. Google developed apps and extensions in Google Play, iTunes, or Chrome web stores. So there's still a ton of attack surface there for people to be looking at. And if you look at this heat map, I think it's fair to say that less than 20% of the submissions received cash rewards in their bounty program. This is off of Google's website. You can go take a look at it yourselves if you'd like. That whole big green section, that's noise. Those are invalid submissions. In the upper section where it says bug filed, no reward, those may be non-exploitable bugs that are not security issues. They may be potentially out of scope, but still a valid issue that needed to be fixed. It's down in the bottom right corner that you hit those rewards. And those items right there are what make this entire program worthwhile for Google. So looking at what that little corner, those rewarded bugs looks like broken out, the majority of their rewarded bugs earned $5,000 per bug. The majority of their payout was done in $5,000 chunks. And so if we're a little conservative and we say they paid out $300,000 in $5,000 at a time chunks, that would be 60 vulnerabilities that they felt were important enough to receive their 3rd highest payout. Because if you look down that list, about halfway down, you'll see they had some $10,000 payouts for even worse vulnerabilities and some $7,500 payouts. So they're getting a lot of very important things to fix across their various products and rewarding for those. So I think it's fair to say that a fair number of researchers are hitting big money here with Google. If we look at additional data about the volume of submissions that Google is receiving over time, it's dropping, which is natural. As vulnerabilities are being found and fixed, there's fewer vulnerabilities in the product. Additionally, Google developers are learning from the things they're fixing and developing fewer of them in the future. So you're seeing that trend line drop. However, as the trend line drops, what happens is you have to start increasing rewards to incentivize the researchers to keep looking. So in Google's own words, based on interviews, surveys, and this graph, we conclude that finding bugs in Google products is becoming harder over time, forcing researchers to search for more complex vulnerabilities. And that's why they at various points during their program, increase the rewards to incentivize those critical finds to still be found. Google publishes some data on the geographic location of their researchers. Honestly, it's not my favorite way to visualize this data, but it gives you an idea of where their researchers are coming from, quite a lot in Europe, in Brazil, some in the US, quite a few in Asia. So that's a little bit about Google. Facebook also has a bounty program. And in their 2014 report, they indicated they had 17,011 submissions, which was a 16% increase over the previous year. That's a lot of submissions to go through. Think for a minute about receiving 17,000 bug reports in 365 days and triaging all of those. 61 of them were high severity. Now, they had an additional number of valid bugs as well. Obviously, they didn't just have 61 valid bugs, but they didn't publish that data point. So I can't tell you quite how many they have or what their validity rate of submissions is quite as visually as I was able to with Google. Their minimum reward is $500 though. So even something relatively low severity has a decent payout. They rewarded people in 65 countries with a 12% increase year over year. They've got 123 countries reporting bugs. So they have a global virtual test team at their disposal to go find issues in their application for them and get paid based on the find. So their payouts last year for those undetermined number of valid submissions out of 17,000 were $1.3 million, paid out to 321 researchers. The average reward being $1,788. They paid their top 5 researchers worldwide $250,000. 5 guys. Those had to be important vulnerabilities, or massive, massive, massive quantities of just vulnerabilities. But, chances are pretty good those were some important vulnerabilities, and we're actually going to talk about a couple of them later that hit the news. So if you look at it, they give some country by country data on their top 5 countries. India, far and away, highest volume bug submitters. 196 valid bugs came from India in 2014 to the Google program. To the Facebook program. Egypt is number 2 with 81 bugs. The United States hits 61 bugs. UK, 28. Philippines, 27. But this talk is not about bug volume. This is about high-value bugs, critical bugs. Critical bugs pay higher, so let's look at what the average payouts were. In India, average payout was $1,343 per bug. Remember, their minimum was $500, so they're getting some good bugs there. In Egypt, $1,220. In the US, $2,470. So they're getting higher severity bugs out of a lower number of submissions in the US. UK does even better. And the Philippines is down around $1,000 per bug. This totals out in those 5 countries to $619,000. That's only 48% of their total spend last year. So they got a lot of good, valid bugs to go fix, and several of them, those 60 plus bugs were critical or severe. GitHub started a program last year, and they celebrated their 1-year anniversary recently. So happy birthday, GitHub Bug Bounty Program. They had in 2014 73 vulnerabilities fixed out of 1,920 submissions. Don't worry about the calculator, I figured it out. That's 3.8% of the total submissions got fixed. They don't publish statistics on the criticality of those vulnerabilities. So I don't have any data to share with you about how many of them were high value, but they had 33 researchers earn $50,000 last year in their program. And at the end of the first year, they doubled their maximum bounty payouts to increase that. Now, I showed you a previous chart where it showed that the Google submissions were dropping over time, and so they were increasing their payouts. And you would think, after only 1 year, why is GitHub raising their payouts? Because their submissions drop. This is a really standard sort of distribution for a bounty program. When a bounty program is new, you see a really high spike, and then it tapers off. But the nice thing about this is you see they continue to get vulnerabilities throughout the year. I spoke with the Zane Lackey, who used to be with Etsy and ran the bug bounty program there, and he told me they had some critical, terrible vulnerabilities that didn't come in until 6 to 8 months into the program. It took a little time to find them, discover them, write the proof of concept. So they come in at various times. So it's not necessarily in the first 48 hours that you're going to see the entire earth burn below your application, but they do come in. Microsoft got into the bug bounty game. They're doing it a little differently, and they don't publish any data on the volume of submissions. They just have a Hall of Fame for their valid bugs. They have an online services bounty for Office 365 and Azure. They have 46 rewarded submissions, but they only started in September 2014. So that's just getting off the ground with 46 submissions. The reward amounts are not published, but you can see the list of who was rewarded. And it's anywhere from $500 to $15,000 depending on the severity of the vulnerability. They have a mitigation bypass bounty program, and this pays up to $100,000. And this is for novel exploitation techniques against protections built into the operating system. So when we're talking about Google or GitHub or Facebook, we're primarily talking about web and mobile applications. You get into Microsoft and you're seeing bounties on complex, research-heavy vulnerabilities in the operating system. On top of that, they offer a bounty for defense on top of the mitigation bypass. So if you come up with a novel way to bypass a protection feature in the operating system, that's a mitigation bypass. And if you also come up with a defense approach to fix that, you can earn an additional reward on top of that. So with the two different models, they've got the online services and the software bounties, they have some different ways of acknowledging these things. So for either software bounties or online services, the Hall of Fame indicates you received a financial reward for your submission. In the software space, when the issue for is patched and goes into a security bulletin and has a CVE associated with it, there's an additional acknowledgement in the bulletin with the CVE. For online services, you still have that Hall of Fame. They also have an acknowledgement page for researchers who submit an issue that doesn't end up receiving financial rewards but is valid. So again, you've got two different bounty models, and it may seem like one of those, well, duh, kind of things, but there's very different profiles of the researchers who do the work. And so understanding this is also pretty interesting. As you can see from the software side of the house, most of the researchers are in North America, Asia, and Europe. But you get into online services, and you have the vast majority of researchers in India. And so that plays into maybe why Facebook had so many submissions from India. And we're going to talk a little bit more later about some of the unique challenges of getting great high quality submissions from a very diverse global crowd who English may not be their first language. And their training may be a little different than what we're used to. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. And just to show some of the data on the payouts for Microsoft in the mitigation bypass category, you see people making anywhere from $25,000 to, I believe the largest one on there is $125,000. And this is some pretty impressive research. These guys have done good work. And this is all available online. So it turns out I have a lot of data. And so I'm going to share a little bit about some of our customers. We recently released the State of Bug Bounty report, and we provided a tremendous amount of data across 30 months of running bug bounties on 166 different customers. We cataloged 37,227 submissions, of which just under 8,000 of them were non-duplicate valid vulnerabilities. There were an additional, basically, of the near 40,000 submissions, close to 20% were duplicates. And those are valid, but they're not first to find. They're not unique findings. You still have to handle those and triage those. But so we had about 8,000 valid vulnerabilities that were original. Of those, 3,621 were financially rewarded, and that does not mean that there were only 3,621 that were important enough to receive money. There's a number of bounty programs that are actually not bounty programs, they're disclosure programs where they're providing a framework and an assurance and a service contract, a social contract with the researcher that if you find a vulnerability in our product, we won't sue you. Like, we will work with you to fix this. We appreciate it. We're going to recognize you. We're going to put you on our Hall of Fame. Maybe we'll send you a T-shirt or, you know, some sort of acknowledgement. And the researcher goes into that project knowing there's no financial reward, but works on it anyway. Sometimes they're charity programs. And so of the near 8,000 valid vulnerabilities, 3,600 got rewarded. We paid out $724,839. The average reward was $200.81, but our top reward was $10,000. Of those 166 programs, each one of them got at least, on average, 4 critical or high severity vulnerabilities. Some of them may only have only gotten 1. I've seen others that got 12. It varies, of course, depending on the security of the application, but pretty much every program is getting really critical and severe vulnerabilities. We had a total of 729 high priority and 175 that were rated as critical. Okay, so high priority, critical. Here's an example of what that means for us. A P1 is our critical, and so for example in web applications, that would be something that allows remote code execution, elevation of privilege, SQL injection, things like that. And then the severe or the high impact has to do with lateral authentication, stored cross-site scripting. It's going to affect the security of the platform and processes. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about high and critical impact vulnerabilities, or P1s and P2s. And so who's finding these bugs? Professional pen testers and consultants, people in this room at this conference, in their free time, they freelance, they go home. It's not their day job to find vulnerabilities in Facebook or Google or a bug crowd customer, but they enjoy it. And so this is something that they do as a hobby. We get a lot of former developers, QA engineers, and IT admins who decide to get into security and get into application security. We see a lot of university students, especially in Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East, who are doing self-taught. And then we have over 18,000 researchers that we're evaluating in this. And this is what our submissions look like by geography for the last 2 quarters. We've got India, US, Pakistan hitting the top 3 for volume of submissions. So, talking about some big bugs. We're going to start off with Google. So in April of 2014, Frederick Almroth and Matthias Carlson found an XXE vulnerability in production. It exploited the Google toolbar button gallery, and they have blogged about it. They received a $10,000 payment for this. Google responded within 20 minutes to their report. Like, they fired it up. They had this idea that, maybe we could do something with a fishy, XML document. What can we do with this? And so when they sent it and Google wrote back like that, they said, well, hey, Google, how much would a cross-site scripting and product earn you? This is what Google sent them back. They're like, this is what it'll earn you. They were given $10,000 for this vulnerability. It was in production, and it was terrible. So again, that bug bounty incentivized them to go looking for something that they reported to Google to get fixed. Facebook, we talked about, they had, $1.3 million in payouts. Well, Reginaldo Silva received $35,000 for his report involving OpenID. He had found a vulnerability in OpenID sometime earlier, and then, after he'd reported it to OpenID and done something, reported it to some other folks, he thought, hey, I wonder if this affects Facebook. And it did. And if it hadn't been resolved, a hacker could have used it to abuse and basically change Facebook's use of Gmail as an open ID provider to pretty much whatever they wanted. So obviously Facebook jumped on top of that, got it fixed, got it fixed quickly, gave Reginaldo a significant reward, and made sure that he had the opportunity to blog about it and receive attention for that useful find. Facebook also had an issue that you may have heard about recently, delete any photo album. Well, this isn't something he found by running a scanning tool or a fuzzer. He was messing around trying to play around with deleting his own photo albums using some of the Graph Explorer access features, and he figured out, wait a minute, I can do more than just delete my own. I can delete yours too. And so he reported that to Facebook, and obviously they fixed that as well and got that taken care of. So this is a vulnerability in a company called Simple. Simple is an online bank, and a researcher with Simple runs a bug bounty through BugCrowd. And a researcher whose username is Darkarnium, his actual name is Peter, he reported a cross-domain information disclosure to them. They fixed it incredibly quickly, and I'm going to let him tell you about it. I think.
Quickly and professionally to this report, the initial response was provided in less than a day, with the patch being pushed to production not long afterwards. As this issue has been patched, I've replicated this behavior for this presentation and included a few screen captures from the process. As an aside before I start, kudos to Simple for actually using HSTS on your website. A very quick test of 8 well-known banking institutions and financial providers yielded one other site configured to use HSTS. This vulnerability was found by running through a simple sign-up process while capturing all traffic for review. After the process was mostly complete, and I say mostly as I didn't bother completing account verification for this testing account, the captured traffic was reviewed for anything that stood out. From a quick glance, I found that there was something very interesting about the boot.js script loaded when a user logs in. As shown in the screen capture, this boot.js file seems to contain some interesting data assigned to the Windows simple boot data variable as a string of JSON. If we re-indent this JSON so it's a little bit more readable, you can see here that this JavaScript file appears to have been personalized with quite a lot of user information. Phone number, email address, date of birth, full name of the user, everything's here. Unfortunately, however, there did not appear to be any one-time tokens or XSSI mitigation in the returned output. As a result, something quick and dirty like the following JavaScript snippet embedded in a website would be enough to access any of this information in a drive-by fashion. That is to say, a user only needs to visit a website containing this code, or a slight variation thereof, after having recently logged into Simple to have this information harvested silently in the background without their knowledge. We'll see the output of this in just a moment, but first, if we have a quick look at the request performed silently in the background after this page has been accessed, we can see that the browser has gone and fetched the remote script as requested by the potentially malicious page, and included cookies known to the browser as part of this request. It's worth noting that the cookie header here is a little bit messed up as I've chopped out any one-time strings from the output. That said, now that we've confirmed this data is able to be accessed quite freely cross-domain, let's give it a proper shot and see what happens. Yep, all data is accessible to our external domain. From here, it will be quite trivial to silently save this information and render something innocuous to the page, or redirect the user elsewhere. As mentioned at the start of this presentation, Simple have since patched this issue and removed all sensitive data from this boot.js script. Thanks again to Simple for their quick turnaround, and to BugCrowd for making it easy to report and track this issue with them.
Alright. So, am I on yet? Can we come back to there? Okay. So, Simple didn't know Peter. Peter wouldn't have been lined up for a pen test contract, but by running a bug bounty, Peter was able to go and find that, get it reported, get it fixed in under 24 hours for Simple. Next up, we have a bug in an application called Smartsheet. Smartsheet's an online collaboration and business productivity software application. They have web and mobile applications with 65,000 customers and over 6 million users. Their customers include Google, Cisco, Uber, Toyota, Facebook, a number of companies. Clifford found a way to take over any user account without any interaction. This was his first private bounty invitation. He's based in the Philippines, and when the program launched, it was midnight his time, so he stayed up to work on it, because he's pretty excited about working on these things. I like sleep, but okay, whatever. And he found an indirect object reference that led to an elevation of privilege, completely no user interaction whatsoever. So this was a bug in the import user feature. There were 4 different user roles. There's licensed user, system admin, group admin, and resource viewer. The problem was there was no check whether the user who was requesting the import had the right privilege. So he simply followed the import process as you would just every day. I'm going to import some users. But before he hit the import button, he fired up an intercept proxy. And what he used was burp. And he changed the value of parameter 1 to the victim target account. And the account numbers, they were parameters, were numbers. And the thing is, the verification email got sent to the imported attacker controlled email. So all you have to do is verify off that attacker email. So the flaw was in the upload import, as you can see here. And all he had to do was change that parameter. And so I don't have a video of Clifford. He preferred to do a write-up. I'm trying to make sure that these disclosures belong to the researchers. This is their work. And so later today or possibly tomorrow morning, that blog post will go live, and I'll tweet out the URL if you're interested. He had requested permission from Smartsheet to disclose, and even though Smartsheet was running a private program, they could see the value in giving that to this researcher in addition to the bounty reward that he received. So he's going to go ahead and blog that up. Alrighty, as you may be aware of, Tesla has a bug bounty program, and it's on their website through BugCrowd. And we had a researcher in India who worked on their bug bounty and found an indirect object reference. Tesla ran a private bounty for the first 2 weeks just to, get the process down before they opened it up to the whole world, because they knew they would get a high volume of reports. You saw that GitHub spike. So, it's sort of a test drive. And we invited a small group of researchers, and this individual was one. And he basically started messing around with logins to the service site and found a way where he could simply just log in as admin. So we're going to let him talk about that bug as well.
Hi guys, this is Chantan Palwai. I'm an independent InfoSec researcher. I reported a bug to teslamotors.com, which is authentication bypass bug, which allowed me to access the administrator account of subdomain of Tesla Motors. Coming to the bug details, Tesla Motors launched their bug bounty program via BugCrowd. As soon as they launched the bug bounty program, I reported few issues to them, which includes an IDOR, which was rewarded by them. I need to appreciate the response of teslamotors.com because they were fast. And after a day, they launched their bug bounty program. I was playing with the subdomain of teslamotors.com. And while fuzzing the URL, I just added a /admin to the URL. I was expecting a 404 response, but I got a response of 302 redirect to some static.teslamotors.com. So I drafted my intention. So I just poking into the URL and I again appended the URL /admin/ some random text, which gave me error access denied. So I made a confirmation that the admin panel of the subdomain exists. So I did a fast directory brute force where I was able to find a modules folder where there is no authentication on that URL. So which allowed me to edit or delete some existing documents or even to add a new document. Again, I need to appreciate the response of teslamotors.com, where they come back with a beautiful response and they patch the vulnerability in less time. Making this as an opportunity, I would like to thank my friend NB Sriharsha, who gave me the idea of getting admin panel. So thank you.
So Shantan worked on this with a friend, and he doesn't have a blog of his own, so it's written up on his friend's blog, and the URL is there. And Tesla granted him permission to disclose this some time ago. All three of these bugs, the researchers requested permission to disclose. Obviously, not every customer has bugs that are disclosed, but these particular customers were willing to, sort of put it out there and say, yeah, we had a critical vulnerability in our platform, and but it's fixed now, and it was fixed fast. Because when these submissions come in, you get them fixed fast. So let's talk about how do we get through the noise to find these submissions. Like, you're a program owner. Like, how do you clear out the hay to find the needle in that haystack? So let's talk about submission framework and expectations. If you are getting bug submissions to email for your security response team, have you set up anything to tell researchers what you need? Do you need an attack scenario first before you go into, do you want to know the security impact? Do you use the STRIDE model? Do your developers respond better to using a DREAD model? What is the language that your organization uses? Put it in your program documentation for researchers who are submitting vulnerabilities so that they can submit what you need so that you can triage it faster. And this is whether it's an email or a web form, just make sure they know how you work because most researchers are more than happy to put it in a format you can use because it's in their best interest to get it triaged quickly as well. How well is it written? Did they spell check? No, okay, I'm kidding. Obviously, a lot of these researchers around the world, English is a second language. And so if you're looking for a, big three consulting report, you're looking at the wrong stuff in a bug bounty program. Yes, you will get some of those. I've seen researchers submit a 7-page PDF that beautifully outlines every piece of the vulnerability, mitigations and workarounds, recommended remediation, and that is a thing of joy when it comes in. But if you're working with a global team, make it easy for them to provide video of the repro steps or, understand there may be some back and forth on asking questions to understand the vulnerability. Have really clear in and out of scope documentation. And understand that sometimes you'll get a valid bug that is neither listed on your in scope or listed on your out of scope. And have a plan for how you handle that. My recommendation is if you're going to make a code change, reward it, and then update your bounty documentation to either put it on one of those two lists, that type of attack or that area. So that the next time it comes up, it's really clear and quick for you to know what do you do with that. This is an example of how Facebook sets expectations in submissions, for example. So these are things that you can do. Other companies are doing it. You won't be sort of the first one out there trying to say, here's how I want it. Well, there's other companies doing that too, and you can even start from their model and make modifications of your own. Other ways to reduce noise, guidance and training. And not every company is going to set up their own, Google Bug Hunter University or the Bounty Hunter's Guide or a forum. But know what resources are out there in those programs and start pointing your researchers at them. When you get a report from someone who maybe doesn't completely understand what an XXS is, there's online documentation you can point them to. Or if someone's sending you false positive burp suite results, there's information you can send them to that you don't even have to create that will tell them, hey, you got to validate your results. And that's going to get you better submissions in the future. It does take, an extra 2 minutes, and that's why it's helpful if you're familiar with what's out there. Again, the clear in and out of scope documentation. I'm going to say this a few times because it's really just that important. If something is out of scope, it gets really quick and easy to be like, nope, out of scope. Out of scope, we told you it was out of scope, we're not rewarding that. This is an example of Google's scope sheet. These are the non-qualifying vulnerabilities. If you submit something on this list, they're just, nope, out of scope. And what's more, if a researcher submits enough things that are out of scope and keeps getting told out of scope, they're going to stop doing it, which is going to cut down on your noise. Sorry. Direct performance feedback. Again, this comes back to if someone is doing the wrong thing, tell them, because chances are they're going to start doing the right thing. It gets frustrating when you've told the same person over and over and over, and I'm not saying to do that, but at least the first couple times give them some feedback on here's what we're actually looking for, or hey, this is a duplicate, but we'd really love to see more submissions from you, or here, this thing didn't actually work the way you think it does, here's why, and that gives them the opportunity to learn and submit better stuff in the future. Rapid triage and prioritization. Clear your queue of new vulnerabilities every day, because if you don't do it today, you might not do it tomorrow, and you might not do it the day after that. And before you know it, a week has gone by, and now you're looking at a pile of bugs, and you're like, oh my God, that's going to take the whole morning. I'll do it after lunch. And then the guy in the queue next to you comes in and wants to play ping pong, and then a week's gone by, and just clear it every day. Otherwise, you get behind, and it just makes it harder. Communicate your priorities. As I said, that prioritization list cuts down on your arguing with researchers about how you're rewarding. How do you deal with duplicates? Duplicates at the P1 and P2 level are pretty uncommon because you fix them fast, and then nobody else finds it usually because you fixed it. But those P3 and P4 vulnerabilities, you're going to keep getting reports on those if you don't fix them quickly, and that has a few problems. One is you're spending operational time telling researchers, sorry, that's a duplicate, sorry, that's a duplicate, sorry, that's a duplicate. If you're getting that same bug reported to you once a week by the bounty hunters, that means it's being found once a week by the bad guys too. So maybe you want to fix those, as quickly as is practical. I'm not saying that, you should fix a P4 in 7 days, but, don't let them languish for months and months. It also creates a really bad researcher experience, and they may just stop looking in your platform completely. Having a defined vulnerability taxonomy. This is not only the prioritization model, but also defining how are we going to pay out for these? What's the prioritization model, not just among the security impact, but among features and in your development team? That can really make it clear what the business impact is and what you want to do with those. And for example, LastPass basically took an existing prioritization model and then adapted it to their business needs, because what's important to LastPass may not be what's important to Pinterest, which may not be what's important to Western Union. So make those modifications. And they went the extra step of putting their minimum payout based on priority. Again, cuts down on discussion and debate about what a bug paid out for. And it makes triage a lot faster because you're not sitting there going, this feels like a $200 reward. And maybe you're just hungry because you didn't eat lunch. And if you had eaten lunch, maybe you'd give them $300 because you'd be in a better mood. Just have that standardized. So is it worth the hassle? Now, these are quotes from customers who didn't really want to be attributed. But they did actually say this when some bugs came in. One of them said, in Mortal Kombat terms, it's a fatality. We had another customer who said they were doing a 2-week proof of concept program, and they said, this one bug justified the entire program. If we don't get another single bug, this bug was worth it. They had it fixed in production within 24 hours, and it was a remote code execution elevation of privilege on an IoT device. And they could have just deleted all of the devices in the entire network. And the customer was like, this is fantastic. This is completely worth it, even with the noisy submissions to deal with. How to reduce noise. Publish and stick to your program SLA. And I call it an SLA because you have a commitment too. It's not just what you expect from the researcher, but what you're committing back to them. So if you're saying, we will respond to this type of bug in this time frame, and they start bugging you in a shorter period of time, like you're within your SLA. You don't have to worry about that quite so much. Stop rewarding bad behavior. If you have a bug bounty program and you take no advice other from me today at all, take this piece. Stop rewarding bad behavior. I have had multiple customers, not just bug crowd customers, but bug bounty program owners across the industry say they've given someone Hall of Fame credit just because they didn't want to argue anymore about, like, this is not an important bug. I am not giving you a reward. And the researcher will be like, well, at least give me Hall of Fame. Like, can I get Hall of Fame acknowledgement even if you're not going to give me money? And they'll get tired of arguing. They'll be like, fine. That's encouraging more of that behavior. And it's diluting the value of your Hall of Fame. So there's a few options. You could start publishing CVSS scores with your Hall of Fame. Okay, these people are on my Hall of Fame because they submitted a CVSS 7.5 and 8.3. This guy did a 2.4. That's one way to extinguish the behavior. You could also just say no. You could have a Hall of Fame over a certain severity level and simply an acknowledgements page for anything else. I know of an organization that does, you only get on the Hall of Fame once a year. Of course, that's the baseline expectation. If you were to submit 5 really fantastic things, they would absolutely find a way to acknowledge that and reward you. And don't create bad behavior. Reward consistently. Reward fairly. Fix quickly. And again, with the documentation. If it's super clear what your program is doing, the researchers are going to snap to that as best they can because it's not effective or profitable for them to not work within the confines of your program. So, this is just 2 slides, so we'll hopefully have a couple minutes for questions. Conclusions. Yes, a bug bounty can absolutely find critical vulnerabilities. And in companies of all sizes. And a lot of, like, you may, if you're into the whole bug bounty scene, you've probably heard of Frederick and Matthias. But chances are, all the other people I talked about today, you probably haven't heard of. Maybe Reginaldo. But these are people around the world, in the Philippines, in India, in other countries that you don't see at conferences, you're not interacting with on a daily basis, and you're bringing their talent and creativity and technical skills into your virtual security team. The call to action, I told you, writing scope documentation, I will tell you that over and over again. Clear submission expectations, providing researcher feedback, staying consistently engaged and rewarding good behavior. Those are like the 5 golden principles of running a healthy bounty program if you choose to do that and getting the most out of the submissions that come in. So, do I have any question time left or did I run over? I have 5 minutes for questions if there are any questions. Are there microphones for questions? And I'm sorry, I can't see anyone in the audience from the lights.
Have you ever heard about people that report issues like that to researchers and they won't like saying it was not considered a critical engineering? Eventually they fix it as a critical.
So the question was, have I ever heard of researchers submitting things, the customer says it's not critical, but then later the customer comes back and does actually fix it as a critical? And I can tell you in our managed programs, we have had researchers come back and say, this customer said it won't fix, it's been 8 months, and it doesn't repro anymore, which meant they fixed it. And we will go back and make sure that that's done right. Now, but that we're a managed service. So if a company were running its own bounty program, that would be between the researcher and the company. And that can happen for a variety of reasons, obviously. But it does not sound implausible.
Can you speak to the benefits and drawbacks of allowing clear text communication versus encryption when you're doing it?
So the benefits and drawbacks of clear text versus encryption during communication, you're talking about critical vulnerabilities, so those should be encrypted. They're really hard to do encrypted. Like PGP, not user-friendly. Neither is GPG. I can't tell you how many times I've screw those things up. I've had people who've been in security for years accidentally send me their private key. And it's not that they're incompetent, it's that it's not user-friendly. And so, personally, I like a secure web form, but again, that's only as secure as your website. So, definitely wouldn't do it in clear text though. And we actually, I think, have people at the microphones. I see people standing. Let me go, there's 2 here and 1 here, so I'm gonna go left, right, left.
Yeah, so I was just wondering why you didn't decide to, why didn't you mention the Chrome bounty program? Because I've actually looked at the vulnerabilities fixed over the past few years, and I noticed over the past few years, their critical severity vulnerabilities has declined significantly. If you look at 2014, I believe only 2 critical vulnerabilities were patched, and the rest are just high, medium, and low. And what are your inputs on that?
Honestly, it was just simply a function of time. I just grabbed the piece of VRP that was documented and available. But yes, the Chrome program follows that same trend where the criticals are declining in frequency, and that's what you would see in a successful program as we're weeding out more and more of the high severity vulnerabilities. I expect that same thing will end up happening with their new Android bounty program as well. Yes.
Just a couple quick questions for comment, potentially. So some of the challenges that we've had has really been around payout of funds to foreign nationals, what kind of background checks. Sometimes these are coming from 12-year-old kids. What's the legality of that? And then, of course, the lawyers are always in the room and start asking, well, if we pay these funds out, how do we know that we have an NDA in place, that it's enforceable? And once you start crossing country lines,
So your website's online today anyway. So those researchers can find those vulnerabilities. You're getting a pen test. The question is, are you getting the results? And this way you get the results. Now, I know different programs have different rules around ages. I know PayPal doesn't pay in every country, so there's definitely complications in running a global program. Most organizations I know have multiple payment techniques. Maybe they use PayPal and Western Union, or they are using something like Payoneer, or I believe ZDI does just straight up wire transfer to your bank. And so it definitely varies by what the program needs. I know some customers, for compliance and regulation reasons, can only have researchers in a private program from certain countries because it's a government project or something. And so it definitely varies. I'd be happy to talk with you more about that afterwards. Yes.
And one assumption we have is when we launch the bug bounty program, that will draw a lot of attention to external hacker.
I'm sorry, can you speak up?
I was saying when we launch when a company launches a new bug bounty program, it's more like flipping a switch. So when the switch is flipped, do you observe there's a lot more hacking activity into the company at all, or how would people manage it from your experience?
So generally speaking, the customers that are really concerned about those spikes, what will happen is they will sometimes have a proxy set up in front of the testers so they can differentiate the testers in the program from people who are just hitting their website. And so they can do some IP whitelisting, things like that. But generally speaking, it depends on how large the customer is. A customer that's seeing millions of hits a day anyway may not notice the increase. I am out of time for questions, but I would be happy to answer any other questions in the hallway, or honestly, like at 5 o'clock, I'm hosting a happy hour if you'd like to come. So I'll be out in the hallway for questions. Thank you.